So my name is Clay Edwards. I teach in Grundy Center, and like she said, I teach 7-8 math. And a few other things I do just listed on here. I don't know if anybody in here subscribes to MTMS, NCTM's journal, but I'm the panel chair for that. So that's a pretty cool thing. I get to go to Reston, Virginia a couple times a year to talk about the journal and discuss the journal with a lot of different people from around the country. So that's a neat thing that I've got going on. I'm also the regional director for our AEA for ICTM, if anybody's a member of ICTM. And then I usually go to the math leadership meetings that they have. And I think there's one next week, too, that I'll be at. I have all my contact information, too. And then the link to this actual presentation is right here. And I've got it on the board over there and over there. And you can also access it through the AEA site that they gave you. And then I just have a whole bunch of different links down here if it's something that you're interested in, anywhere from different presentations that I've done to what I send out to parents at the beginning of the year. So if that's something that you're interested in looking at, feel free to click on this. Any questions that you have today, just make sure you stop me and let me know. I'm really trying to give you something that you can take back with you to your classroom and use today. I'm kind of summing this up as this is kind of what my classroom looks like for a day. And sometimes I think it's kind of hard to explain as far as just what happens, because I feel like it's a lot different than most classrooms that you'd walk into. So I always preface this by saying, if you ever want to come to my classroom, just let me know. I'd like to have anybody. My students like it when people show up. They like interacting with different people that are there. I've got a group from Mount Pleasant that's coming next week. So I get people from everywhere, so feel free if you want to see any of this stuff in action, just contact me and I will set it up for you. So as far as one-to-one goes, we are a one-to-one school, and this is our 6th year of being one-to-one. And we started out with MacBooks, and just basically for cost reasons, now we have Chromebooks. And I found that the Chromebooks work just fine. We haven't had much of a problem with them at all. And this year we actually have the ones that, I don't know exactly what the exact brand that they're called, but the kids, they have touch screens and you can fold them around and everything. So that's been a real positive, and the students really enjoy that. I've always had a laptop cart in my room, and I guess I've been lucky in that regard. I remember the first year I taught there, when we had a couple of carts, it's always like cutthroat to sign up for the cart. And now we don't have to do that anymore, which is nice because all the kids have computers and all the kids take them home. I have a couple of other things on here just as far as if you're interested in the different one-to-one things I've spoken at or the different journal articles I've written on one-to-one, you can click on those things and find out. So as far as what I've done with one-to-one, it's just kind of been a little bit of, I don't want to say trial and error, but it has been a little bit of trial and error because you don't really get much instruction as far as how to implement something like this in your classroom. And I think mathematics is probably maybe the most difficult to implement, because you think normally of like, well, it's easy for language arts because the students can type, or it's easy for social studies or science because they can research things. But what do you do with it for math? And so there's not a lot of professional development. I remember when we first went through professional development, when we got our MacBooks, like the first 2 days we were like, here's how you turn the computer on. Here's how you, this stuff that nobody needs. And then I remember the third day was just, here's what you should do with your kids. You should have them make a movie for everything. And then people start making a movie for everything, and then after about 2 days, the kids are tired of it, and then that's over with. And you don't know what else you're supposed to do with it. And there's a lot of other reasons why it's difficult, too. We use a program in our school. It's called IXL, and I like it to the extent that I like it, I guess. But you can get fooled really easily online by just different things you see. Like here's like the screen for IXL, and it tells you that it's practice that feels like play. And so you get excited about that when you see that. You think the kids are going to have a good time with this. I'm not sure if any of the kids have ever told me that they'll tolerate it and they'll work on it and they'll work hard on it, but I'm not sure if it's anything that they're like, hey, this is a fun game or anything like that. So you have to watch out, obviously, what you click on when you go online. I also found this. I typed in like the best math resources, and of course I got like a Pinterest thing. And you know that you're in trouble when the third resource on here is like a cross multiply to figure out which fraction is bigger. These are not the 25 best resources out there. So you've got to be careful in that regard as well. I taught 1 year at UNI. I was the middle level coordinator there. It was a lot of fun, I thought, but I really missed my middle school students. But when I was at the college level, I had a lot of students that were basically a semester away from student teaching. And we're getting to the point now where we have teachers actually becoming teachers that in high school they were one-to-one. We're getting to that point now, and boy, you would not imagine just the overly negative points of view of one-to-one that some of these students had. And a lot of it is just because I think the teachers just didn't know what to do with it. So I had them one day, and I had a lot of different kids. I didn't have just math students, a lot of different students. But I said, come up with the best one-to-one resource that you can find. What do you envision this being? So here's one of the best ones I got. So they did something just as far as just basic math goes, and they found this. And this is what they thought was the best thing here. I don't know why he's not running anywhere, but this is, yeah, there we go. So this is the best thing that they found. And this is horrible compared to what you should be probably doing with one-to-one. But this is what people envision one-to-one being, as students there clicking buttons, doing things. And I'm here today to tell you that that's not at all what I do. Another link I found as far as what's the goal of one-to-one. So I found this online, and I always like this picture. I don't know if you can see this. But this is just a picture of an online resource. And again, this is for little kids, but it still serves the purpose. Down here, if you look closely, the tagline for this company is keeping kids busy. And I think that that's another poor point of one-to-one is, I've been in a lot of classrooms, and I mean, this is embarrassing. I think it should be embarrassing, but I see a lot of teachers that they're sitting at their desk, and the students are just working, and then the kids are just working, and it's like there's no connection between the two. And my goal is not, I want the kids to be busy working on things, but you're just missing all the opportunities that the one-to-one has as far as walking around, having conversations with everybody. So this is definitely something that you don't want to find and you don't want to be a part of. The last one I have on here is, I don't know, I've seen so many programs out there that make it sound awesome that you can grade things fast. If I can grade things fast, it's not worth doing. And so, this is a tweet that I found that's just this is exciting. They're pointing this out as being exciting, and it's not exciting because if you're just grading things quickly like that, you're not involving any kind of student work. You're not involving any kind of conversations that you would have. This is not the point of one-to-one, for you to do your job faster. I think personally, I do way more than I ever did before 9 or 10 years ago with one-to-one. I'm much more involved with what the students are doing, much more involved on the feedback side of things. This just isn't what one-to-one is. So what do I use it for? So I'm going to kind of break this into two different parts here. And I noticed that a lot of people didn't have a lot of paper and pencil for that last thing as far as the question we did on the Quizlet. And I'm going to have you get involved with something today, and we're going to do kind of a task that we would do in my classroom just so you can see what the students are up against anyway during the day. So one of the things I use in my classroom is what I call mathematical tasks. And this is something that we do once a week, and we happen to do it on a Tuesday. I know it's a Tuesday today, so we're actually not doing it today in my class. We're going to bump it to a different day. But basically, it's a large-scale problem-solving task where students collaborate together. They show all their justification and understanding. And the technology part comes in with the setup of the task to get the kids interested in the task. And then there's other technology points that come with it. So basically on a regular Tuesday, if I'm there, the students are going to walk in the room and they're going to look at my screen. So I have my computer and it's plugged in and I have a TV up on the wall and they have all the directions. And then my directions are also on my website too, which I can show you later. I don't care who the kids work with, so they can work with anybody that they want to. I would prefer that they work with friends or people that they're able to actually have a conversation with. There's nothing worse than pairing two people up that are mortal enemies or have never talked with anybody before, each other before. Because then you don't have you have this fake conversation going on. They're pretending to have a conversation, and I want to have a real conversation. And I like the fact that with one-to-one, I've got everything on here, so I don't have to do the whole at the beginning of class, hey kids, here's what we're going to do today, which wastes 5 minutes normally. It's just we're starting on things, which is nice. My job is totally different with one-to-one. So my whole thing 10, 12 years ago was I remember an overhead projector, and I had it right here, and we'd do 10 example problems, then we'd do some book work and things like that. That was my job before, and I didn't have a lot of interaction with the students. Other than just me talking. Like this right here, I'm talking to you. This is not what I'm used to. During a class period, I might address the class at the end of class for 2 or 3 minutes to talk about how things went, what do we need to do for next time. Otherwise, it's just individual conversations with people, individual conversations with groups. I expect a lot of justification. I remember when I started talking about justification in my class, like when I get my 7th graders, they don't understand what that means, like to justify something. I remember the first time we did one of these tasks, my student justified by saying I used a calculator. Like that was their justification. That's obviously not a justification. But that kind of gets into, people talk about, can I still use paper and pencil when I'm one-to-one? And you'll find out as we go through some of the stuff that we're doing, I still use a lot of paper and pencil. So here's one of the tasks that we would do, and I normally do this with 8th graders. And I have a link to all the tasks that we do, places that you can find tasks online, and just so you can kind of get an idea. So here's kind of the setup for this task. So basically, I didn't know about this until I found it online somewhere. There's a racetrack in Italy, and I think it's basically like 8 miles. And I set up this race where my car from high school is racing against this really fast car. And so what I start with is I show them this video, and I just want them, like it's 7 minutes long, but I just tell them to watch from like 30 seconds to whatever, just so they can kind of get an idea of what the track looks like, what the situation actually is here. And this kind of gets them excited to do something. I mean, I could do a whole bunch of like circle problems or ratio, proportion problems, but this gets them interested in actually doing something, and it puts some kind of a context to what we're doing. And then in this one, I have another technology component. I used Google Maps to actually find out where this place was, and it gives them kind of a perspective. So like, here's the close view, but like, I'm not sure if some of my kids could even find Italy on a map, so this kind of gives them a reason to kind of look and check it out. So like, you can still see it from a long ways away, and you can back it up and see where we actually are in the world. And again, that just kind of builds the interest level for what the students are doing. And then I found this task online, and I've just made a lot of alterations to it. So like in this case, I put my own personal story in. So the kids always like it when I talk about my high school days or whatever. So I'll put a picture of my car in there just so they can see what it actually looks like. And this isn't the car, but that was the type of car I had in high school. So then they make fun of me with that, but it's a lot of fun. And then I pick a car that they think will be cool, so I put that on there anyway. And so again, it's just more of using the technology to set the stage for what they're doing. And then I give them some information. And, depending on how tight you want these answers to be or how loose you want these answers to be, the point is that they can justify and they can talk through what they're doing. So, like, obviously, my car is not going to go from 0 to 40 in, like, 0 seconds. Like, there's going to be some time to speed up. So, if you want your students to implement that, you can have that as a discussion with them while you're walking around. If you don't care about that and you just want them to have a way to figure this out, that's fine, too. Then here's a little piece of information that it's kind of going to help them out, get them a little bit further with this. This will eventually get them to actually figure out how far around the track is. And then I use Desmos for this, and this is actually not something that I created, but it's something that the person who made the task created, which is nice, and it's kind of to the last presenter's point where, you don't have to create all this stuff yourself. Like, you can modify. I mean, this whole thing is a modified version of what somebody else has created. So if I click on this Desmos map, it sets the situation up a little bit more, and I have to put in a little text as far as what this map even is talking about. But basically, here's the track. This green line is the starting line, and here's the Cobra right here. And then here's my head start right here. And you can adjust these sliders a little bit so you can figure out, what the degree of that head start is. So that's a piece of information that you could use to answer this question. And then we answer the questions. So the actual questions, and we're just going to focus on the first question today, is who would actually win the race? My car with the head start or the other car? So that's something that I'm going to have you work on today, and I'll probably give you about, 10 minutes maybe to work this through and talk with people, and I'll walk around. But I just want you to kind of give you an idea of what this might look like. So I have a blog that I put a whole bunch of student work on, and at this point in the year, I'm kind of disappointed because we're almost to November, and I haven't been able to make a new post. I've just been super busy, and I actually don't have a new post for a while, but I have this stack of student work on my desk that I'm meaning to actually put on there. But I try to put on the student work from these things just so you can see kind of what my students are doing and how much I'm asking them to do, and they do quite a bit. And this takes a while for them to get used to because, to be honest with you, when I get them as 7th graders, they're used to putting down, here's the answer, that's it. They had no process, no context, nothing. So this takes a long time to get to, But once we get to it, you'd just be amazed just as far as what they can accomplish. And we've noticed on here, like just individual things to point out. There's a lot of like ratio tables going on here, a lot of number lines and things like that. Like if you look at the Iowa Core, the Common Core closely, there's not a lot about, well, I don't think there's anything about proportions or things like that. So we're not setting up proportions for this. They're doing this in ways that actually make sense to them. So we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but I want to give you some time to try to answer this first question. And again, feel free to collaborate with whoever you want to, and we can go through some different methods in about 5 or 7 minutes here. Go ahead.
Okay, you two. Take it away.
I'm sure this is just like it is in class.
Yeah, that's right. I'm that one.
It's something I'll do while the students are working. I have all the answers on my iPad on like a picture. Like I've done this problem like 10 different times to figure out the different ways that the students would do this. And if you don't do that ahead of time, it's going to be really hard to pull this off because you're going to have many different students coming up with many different ways to do this. And you've got to be able to have a quick conversation with them, either to give them a little bit more information or just to check and see if they're in the right spot. So I always put that on my iPad. So that's another use of technology. I just take a picture of it, and I can just walk around with it to see how they're doing. All right, let's come back together as a group. Anybody really proud of what they did that they'd like to share with everybody here? All right, this guy right here is getting pointed at. So why don't you just you don't even have to give like just talk about the process. Like, what did you do? Because you could go about this a lot of different ways. You could be as exact as you wanted compared to not as exact. Just talk about what you did.
Basically, you said your car was kind of estimated at like a quarter of the way around. So then we found the circumference of the whole circle, which is how far the new car had to go, and that was 7.85 miles. And then we basically found how far your car was going, which was 5.89 miles approximately. If we use a quarter, I think we'll use it. And then we just figured out how long it would take to travel those distances based on the speed they were going.
That sounds good, and I like what he said about using the quarter part of things because depending on where you move that slider, it might say 100 degrees, it might say or how big you have it. So that's up to you as far as how exact you want it to be. And in this case, we used a quarter. It's fine. I would let my students do that. That would be fine because that shows that they actually know what a quarter of a circle is, I guess. So that's a good thing anyway. Anybody have something that's a little bit different that they would like to share as far as how they came up with it?
No, you said we don't use proportions, but I set it up as a proportion.
That's fine.
Because it was, I think we used 97 degrees out of the 360 was the head start, so then you just take that to find the distance that they'd already traveled. And then it's just kind of a unit rate problem to solve for the amount of time it takes.
Yeah, and I guess you have to understand, like, when I say like they don't use proportions or anything, really it is a proportion when they set up those ratio tables. They're kind of doing the same thing, they're dividing and multiplying is what they're doing to get to it. It's just when I don't know, from my past experience with proportions, like way back, the students don't know, it's like a rule, and they don't understand like the algebra behind it, so that's why I try to stay away from it, but it is the same kind of concept anyway. A lot of my students will use percentages for this, like this percentage of the track. So if they did 100 degrees out of 360, what percentage is that? There's a lot of different ways that you can come up with this. And I was talking with a couple different groups that teach, like upper level math. Again, you can take this situation or this task, and you don't have to use the questions that I use. You can change that. Or you can change what the miles per hour are. Or if you didn't drive a Chevy Celebrity in high school, you can put your car on there. You can do all that different stuff. You can just be really flexible with it. It's a great example of taking something that's already made and just altering it a little bit. So I showed you some of the student work that I had, and this is something that you can click on because you can get to this website. But something I also like to do with these tasks and for other things in my classroom is I like to post this student work. So even though you probably can't see this real close, I like to post examples of, it's really great student work, But when I present it to the students, I present it as this is the norm. This is what I expect from every single student in there. And I really feel like that raises the game for everybody that I have. I never like to say, hey, this is the most excellent thing ever. I just like to present it as normal. And so the students see these examples, and every once in a while I'll get a new task and I'll put it up there, just depending on how much time I have. But it just really gives the students an example of what good work looks like. Because I think going into this, like I said, my students didn't really understand that or don't really know that, so they need those actual examples so they see what I expect. I could talk about it all day, but if they don't see what I actually expect, then you're not going to get what you actually want. Scrolling down here, as far as student conversations go, I think when people come to my classroom, this is probably the number one thing that they...
So are you going to tell us who won the race?
Oh, I can, I guess. Well, yeah, I didn't... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's like, was it 8? My car did not win the race. The Cobra ran the race, and I think it was like I got it on there, but it's like 5.2 minutes, and the other one's 8.5 or something like that, 8.5, 8.6. Sorry. Thanks for I'm sorry. Thanks for pointing that out. If my students didn't know that, they would be saying the same thing too. So I'm glad you said that. Student conversations. I think if you went to my classroom, and this is what most people say, like when I have groups come to my room, like when we have time to actually talk about things at the end, they're like, man, I can't believe that your students actually stayed on task for 60 minutes and they actually talked about this, what you're actually doing. And people ask me, how do you do that? How do you get them to do that? And it's tough to explain, but it's more of you have to work up to it, I guess. Because my 8th graders this year, because I had them as 7th graders, the first day of school, we didn't do any expectations. They walked in the room, there was a task on the screen, and we started. No expectations or anything. We just got to it. But with my 7th graders, you just can't do that because they're just not used to that at all. So it's going over expectations, and I can show you my list of expectations is right here, and they're not really long expectations. And then it's just, continuously, if you see something that you need to point out, stopping the class and talking about it. And I think that's something that really helps a lot. You can talk about like what you are going to do and not going to do, but again, I think it's best to have some kind of example. So we'll start one of these tasks, we get 10 minutes into it, I hear one of my 7th graders talking about something else, even if it's only for like 15 seconds. Stop everybody and point out what's going on. And I mean, I generally don't call people out in my class for things, but that would be, it's basically calling somebody out for a real example so students actually understand what's happening. And if you do that enough times, I would say that my 7th graders, we really got on board probably towards the end of September. And it took that long. And it's not that the class was terrible or anything like that, but it just takes a while to get everybody on board, and you just have to keep, it's kind of like I have a 2-year-old at home, and it's the same kind of thing. Like if you let her get away, I think she's a good kid, but like if you let her get away with things like standing up on a chair or whatever, then she's just going to keep doing that. And you have to make sure that you point these things out. Not like it has to be like a big punishment or anything, but it's just continuously pointing these things out. I think probably the biggest help for my expectations on here is that very first. I could only probably just have the first one on there and we'd be fine, but my entire class is focused on improvement. That's the whole thing. And it's focused on that because that's something that every single student can attain. Every student can attain improvement in some way, shape, or form. Now, if I want to go to like standardized testing and I want to say like, you have to be at the 90th percentile, not every student is going to be able to attain that maybe eventually, but not in a year's worth of time. So we just look for ways to show growth. And these tasks are great ways to show growth. Like we'll stop like at the end of class, like, when we do our task in the next week, and I'll stop and just say, think about how this went 2 months ago, and think about how it's going right now, just to point those things out to them so they can see how much progress that they're making. Because sometimes if you don't give them a lot of time to reflect, they won't stop and think about those things. And it is really a lot different than it was in August when we did this. I think the other thing that really helps is just your overall culture in your classroom, but also your overall culture in your school too. And it's tough because sometimes you really can't control that, but I really feel like I work with, I'm the only 7th and 8th grade teacher, but I feel like I work with other 7th and 8th grade teachers, like social studies teachers who have the same ideals and values as I do, like as far as like conversation in the classroom goes. So that's helpful too, because nothing's worse when you have 3 people that are on board and 1 person that's not, because the students see that the expectations are a little bit different. It's not that like they have these posted in their room either, but it's just like the general expectations.
Do your kids come up with those expectations, or do you present those to them?
No, I present them to
Okay.
them, yeah. And I've heard that, the kids write the expectations, stuff like that, that's fine. These are the ones I want, and these are the ones I want to make sure that they do, so I put them up here. I already talked about modeling a little bit, and I could just show you, and again, if you really want to see what this looks like, you probably got to make the trip, but I can just kind of give you a few examples of what my classroom looks like. These are my 8th graders right here. They're working on a task right now. Every once in a while, I'll just step back and take a picture of what's going on. And I know some people would say, well, I have a lot of kids. Is this going to be possible? This class has 30 kids in it, and it's possible. And I think this is probably the best, my best example of a class right here, and I have the most kids. I'm not saying that I would voluntarily take 30 kids every time, but I really like this class the best because I think the more students you have, the more conversations that you're able to have. I have one class that I have like 18 in, and I like it a lot. We're doing fine, but I just don't feel like the conversations are as good as when you have 30. So this is a picture of something that we have going on. We'll just put a few of them up here just so you can see. This kid couldn't even spell his own name at the beginning of the year, and now he's having in-depth conversations here. So this is a really big step to point out. And I'll take these pictures. They don't know I'm taking these pictures, and I'll show them. I'm like, look at this. You're having a real conversation with somebody about something. And it's just nice to point out any kind of positive or any kind of improvement area. We've got a group of students talking. And this is like what I'm talking about where I don't need you to I don't need to pick the groups for you. Like, these kids weren't working together like at the start, like some of them were and some of them were. And then they found that they were on kind of a common problem that they're having difficulties with. Either they get together, or a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just, these people are talking about the same thing. Go over here so they can have that conversation. Selecting a task, I think probably the number one thing is you want to have something that's interesting for the kids when you're doing one of these tasks, especially if it's something that's, this is going to take, like this task probably takes, we do a whole class period with it, and I'll give them additional time to work on it too, outside of class or during other class periods. But I think having that interesting situation keeps them on board and keeps them thinking about it. One of the tough parts about this is you want your students to be so successful and you want to have them, get the right answer or whatever. But you really have to step back a little bit when you're walking around and having these conversations because, at the beginning, they'll try to get all the information out of you that you can. And so, like my 7th graders, I find it interesting because I'll talk to them for a little bit and I'll just walk away from them. And they actually think probably the first 3 or 4 weeks of school that I'm kind of rude. And I think I'm probably one of the nicest teachers, I think anyway. But it just takes a little while for them to figure that out, that, no, I'm not doing this on purpose. I'm not turning my back on you on purpose. It's just, I'm not going to tell you everything because you have to be able to figure it. It does me no good if I tell you everything because we might as well have not done it in the first place then because then you didn't learn anything anyways. That's shifting the philosophy from being done to actually understanding something, which is the most important thing. I do have links down here to a whole bunch of places where you can get these tasks. And again, use them as is, change them around. These top 2 links are actually tasks that we have done or will do this year, and it's something that the students have access to. So like last week, the task was, how long does it take to mow this yard? And there's a video on here that shows him mowing just like a small section of this yard. And of course, I got wide ranges of answers for that, but it's just, what are you willing to accept? What's something that actually makes sense? And I can scroll down through some of these we did something with Pokemon Go that I found that wasn't as fun this year because not as many of the kids are playing it as they played last year. But that's something that we did. I'm trying to find one that's really interesting here. There's a lot of ones here. But this is something that I would take a look at if you're looking for ideas for tasks because these are ones that I have used so you can definitely see. The other links are ones that I get them from those people. This one's fun because it's kind of like something where they start to graph linear relationships, and my students have no idea what a detention is because we don't have detention at our school, I guess, or not in the formal sense. But basically what this is the students have to pick a teacher to pay money to get out of detention. So like one of the teacher options is like you pay like $160 and you can get out of as many detentions as you want to. You pay, $6.25 per detention, or you pay like a flat amount and then this much per detention. So it kind of gets us talking about linear graphing in an interesting situation. We did this one to start the year. Basically, this is, I don't know, maybe I always like watching this. I don't want to wait for the ad. Okay, we're not waiting for the ad. But anyway, it's Kevin James in Grown Ups, and he's peeing in the pool is what he's doing. And so basically I found on this website that, even though you put chlorine in the pool, there's still like, the actual number was 18.5 gallons of actual pee in the pool for every 220,000 gallons in the pool. So we figured out how much pee would be in the pool, and it's fun because you bring like milk jugs so they can actually see like what 18.5 gallons of pee is going to look like. So we had a lot of fun with that, and it grossed a lot of people out, but it's just something that they're actually interested in that we're doing. So there's a lot of actual examples there for you to use. Now, another thing is planning for a task. So if I were, like, let's say I had my kids in here, and I was pretty confident that everybody in here was going to come up with the answer to that problem. I was pretty hopeful that we could do that. But if I didn't actually go through this task ahead of time, and then I tried to circulate the room and talk with the students, it would be a disaster because you would not know the multiple ways that students are coming up with it, the different pitfalls that you came up with. So if you're going to do one of these, do it ahead of time. Like, don't try to skip and just start the task because you will be in trouble. And especially if you think about 30 kids in a classroom and you're walking around having a conversation, you can imagine like how many hands are probably up in the air. And if you didn't have a fast answer, or at least something to keep them going, you would be in trouble. So that's why I always take pictures. I always do all the work ahead of time as many ways as I can think of it. I put it on my iPad so I can just flip through the different pieces of work that I have, and it helps me out because I think I'm a pretty smart guy and I can come up with these things, but when you have to come up with it in like 2 seconds as opposed to like 2 minutes, you don't have 2 minutes. So yeah, that's why I make sure I'm prepared in that way. And then as far as just time frame goes with this, we always do these on a Tuesday. Today's a Tuesday, so we're not doing one because I'm not there. But we always do these on a Tuesday. And so how it works is we'll have, I think my classes are actually 56 minutes. So I'll give them 56 minutes. I have probably about 25% of the students that will get done with that task, all 3 questions, in the 56 minutes. And then I just have it due the next week, so like the next Tuesday. So they'll have class time to work on it. And as you'll see, we always have a lot of class time because my class is different. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But they can work on it whenever they need to in class to meet that deadline. So I always give them a lot of time to do this because I don't want things to be rushed or I don't want things to be hurried because I want them to really actually understand things. And so you have to be willing to provide time. Like if you're really interested in your students understanding something and justifying things, but you're only willing them to give a small amount of time, it's not going to work out. Those 2 things don't go together. So you have to make sure that you are able to budget a lot of time. And a lot of people ask me, well, how do you do that? We have so much stuff to cover. I mean, one thing is, and we'll talk about this too, is I don't use any textbook or anything like that, so I get to kind of pick and choose what I want to do as far as from the Iowa Core. Well, I mean, I do everything from the Iowa Core, but like if you use a textbook, there's so many things in a textbook that don't match up to what we're expected to do or want to do. So it's like you could go through and probably cut half the stuff that's in there anyways if you're worried about getting through the whole book or something like that. That's going to buy you a little bit of extra time. Tips for you as far as these tasks go. So this is something that frustrates me when people come into my class because they already come in with like, not everybody, this is just a few people, but they come in like with a negative viewpoint as far as like, whatever this guy's going to show me today, my kids can't do it. That's what they come in with, and I think that's a silly way to think. But, or they see my kids and they're like how successful they are, and they're like, oh, you just have a good group of kids this year. It's not how it works. If you come in August and see my classroom, I wouldn't say it's in disarray, but it's tough. It's not what it looks like in October. And it just takes a lot of time and a lot of patience. And what happens when people do this is they get frustrated. They're like, the first time that they do this, it didn't work very well, I'm done with it. And that's a big problem because then you're not able to try anything. Then you fall back into all the stuff you did before, which is, I mean, I'm not saying you might do awesome things, that's great. It's just that, I can see like for me, myself, 10 years ago, if I would have tried this, it didn't work, I would have fell back to, here's my overhead projector, that's safe for me anyway, so I'm gonna use that. You have to be willing to give things a chance that are a little bit different. I also find that doing these tasks makes everything else that I do better. Because we still do regular work in my classroom, and we'll talk about what that looks like. But every single thing that we do is just so much better. Like, we'll have conversations about, like, computation problems, like the students will, just because we had conversations about it in these tasks. They'll show a lot more justification than I ever got 10 years ago on just, regular algebra problems, or, take that inequality problem we did earlier. They'll really go through that and show me everything that I'm looking for. So I think it raises the level of everything that you're doing. I do have a blog post right here that you can take a look at, and some student work too of some people ask me, how does this mesh with standardized testing? Like you're testing, you're doing this high level stuff, but then the tests are not necessarily high level. And I have a link up at the top that you can look at a research study that I did, but basically what it found is when I worked with a couple of different classes, and one of the classes we did all tasks, that's all we did, and the other one we did more of a traditional classroom. I like to think it was a better version of a traditional classroom, but it was good, I thought. But we took 2 versions of a test at the end on ratios and proportions, and the group that did all these higher level tasks did really well on the task-based assessment and really well on the lower level assessment, whereas the students that just did the lower level stuff only did well on the lower level stuff. So it doesn't necessarily translate both ways, but it does translate up or down if you've done all the higher level stuff. So I've found like we do like NWA map testing. I'm sure that some people do that anyway. And I remember, when we used to do that 10 years ago, I would have students that get done with 54 questions in 20 minutes. And I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, it's crazy. Like, each one of those questions should take you like 5 minutes a piece to do. So now I have most of my students take 4 or 5 hours to do 54 questions, and they're writing everything out, and they're justifying everything. And it's not a surprise. Like, our scores are amazing, and they are. And it's just because they're taking more time to do it. They're taking more time to think things through. They're taking more time to justify it. Now, by no means do I really enjoy spending 5 hours taking a standardized test, but if you do it the other way and you're actually looking for some valid results, you're not getting valid results anyways, so you might as well take the time to do it right. I already talked about patience, and then I already talked about this too. So that's what I have about tasks in my classroom. I'm going to get a drink of water here quick. This is more talking than I think I've ever done before. Anybody have any questions just about tasks in general?
Where's a good place that you find tasks?
So up here, and it would be right here, I would click on those links. And this has a variety of middle school tasks, high school tasks, just depending on which link. Everything on these pages are free. I would just look at, I honestly started with a lot of the stuff that Dan Meyer did. Used a lot of those tasks. I remember the first time I had the giant gummy bear in my room, and I still have a giant gummy bear in my room. There's a lot of interesting situations on this. And if you're a high school teacher, there's ones that they're geared towards high school too. Like if you click on Dane Ehlert, there's ones that are high school level. But in all seriousness, like I was saying before, you can take any situation and make it a high school task. I mean, you just have to change what the questions are and what the expectations are for it. But I would use these to get you started. That way you don't have to search around the internet everywhere to try to find something. These are wonderful resources, and I've used things off of every single one of these resources. So you should be able to find something that works for you, hopefully. Anybody else? All right. So this is kind of, I guess, part 2. And because the question I always get is if I don't do the second part of this, people are like, well, is that all you do in your class? You just do those tasks all day, every day? And that's what, so the answer to that question is no. So basically on the other days, there will be something that we do each day. So like Monday, we'll do a short little mini lesson over a topic. Tuesday, we do the tasks, like I said. Wednesday, we do like a spiral practice or a little review. Thursday, we'll do some computation. Friday, we'll do a whole group question. But while that's going on, all the units that you would think about, probably that if you do it out of a book, I have all that stuff set up online, and everything is set up to be self-paced for the students. So, like for instance, if I go to my website, I have all the units listed here that we'll do. Some of these don't have things under them. They don't have units under them, but like right now, we're working on a lot of transformation stuff. So I've got all these units set up as far as what I expect. And they're just different things that I've found or different things that I've created that I put together into a unit. And the students work through these, and they show me all their understanding and things like that. And this is how we take care of a lot of that bookwork stuff. So there's a lot of videos involved. There's a lot of manipulatives involved. There's a lot of, online manipulatives involved. There's some online practice involved. But they'll roll through these units. And here are the units that I kind of do. So like we'll do 5 different units in 7th grade, and they're listed here. And we'll do 3 different units in 8th grade. And you'll look up here and you'll think, well, not everything is listed on there. And that's true, it's not. On Mondays when we do some of those mini lessons, we'll pick out some of the different topics that I don't feel like fit very well into these lessons that the students would do. But I have different resources that I like to put into these units, so I can share those with you a little bit. BuzzMath is a link to, like, is a free, you can use it for free, and it takes you to a set of, practice problems for a certain topic or standard that you want to do. And the reason I really like BuzzMath is a lot of times it involves some kind of an on-screen manipulative, or it'll involve some actual understanding piece to it that I think is really helpful to use. IXL, I showed you that, and that's the one that I'm not always thrilled with that, but it's a nice practice website. Our school does pay for a subscription for that, so we do have it and we do use it. I think the one thing you have to be careful with is if you use some of these online resources like BuzzMath and IXL, you still have to make sure that the understanding is very evident. Because if you've ever used anything on a computer before, you would just be amazed how students could answer something enough times and figure it out and actually get an answer for something. And that's something that you want to avoid at all costs. And I think that's one of the reasons why one-to-one gets kind of a bad name, is because people picture it like that. So while my students are doing this, they're writing everything on a whiteboard, they're using paper. I mean, they're showing everything, so when I need to see it, I've got it. So make sure that you're implementing that as well, or else you can get students that get done with these things and they still don't have any idea what they're doing. I mean, even on IXL, like I had, I don't know, it's probably 5 years ago, I had one student that learned how to do like some background, I don't know anything about it, but I actually eventually figured out how to do it. Did some like background coding, so like the picture on the screen says that they're done with whatever they were doing when they're really not. So they'd send me a screenshot of this, and this is like the beginning. I mean, they must have been getting away with this like for years, and this is the beginning of the year when I got them in 7th grade. And so, I'm checking for all their understanding, and they're like, I don't have any of that. I'm like, well, I'm not taking any of it. It's just what your expectation is. But I would just be careful with that and make sure that everybody's got proof of everything, just like you would with the task. I mean, you saw that student work for the task. I'm expecting the same things out of this. I'm sure a lot of you by now are familiar with Desmos. It's been out for a while. We don't, oh, go ahead.
As far as their proof, you said that they have to take pictures. I know on the top it said, so what do you do? Like they take pictures of it and then what? Or how do they show you proof?
So they'll have it. So obviously I'm not in my class today, so they're working on things. So they'll either work on it on paper, do it on paper, or if they do it on a whiteboard, a lot of my students use a whiteboard, they just pull their phone out and they take a picture of what they had, just to give me an idea of what they're even doing. I'll just ask for it, just so we have it. So it's not, I mean, for everything, I like stuff on this, I might say, and turn this in with it. A lot of times when I'm at school, like I'm walking around talking with the kids, so I know what they're doing, so I don't need them to turn in every little piece of work that they have for something like this. But like on a day like today when I'm not there, you better believe I'm going to be asking them about it just to see what they actually have. But it's just nice, so if I have a question about how they did something, then we're going from there. Like we're solving algebraic equations right now, and I have a couple kids that are working kind of far ahead, and sometimes they're good enough that they can just estimate what the number is going to be. They plug it in and they get the answer, which is fine. I want to see the actual the steps and everything, so that's what I'll ask for. So I had somebody that even today emailed me a picture of their work and things like that, and they just plugged in numbers and showed me that. And that's not what I want to see. So it's easy to have that conversation and go back. But you always want to check for those things to make sure. So I make sure that I do that. Because otherwise it's just this, and I don't want this. So Desmos, we actually don't use Desmos that much as far as just the calculator goes. But we'll use it a lot for the classroom activities. And if you want to learn more about that, I would just find some kind of a seminar or something on Desmos classroom activities. Like if you go to the, I don't know, AA might have something as far as somebody that's just doing something about Desmos. Or like I'm sure that somebody at the one-to-one convention thing in April will have something on it. But it's just a whole involved thing where all these activities are set up on there that students really enjoy, and they're very interactive. And that's something that I use quite a bit. And then illustrative math, they have tasks on there that I like to use, that I like to stick into those units because they're not as long as some of the other tasks that we do. And I'm sure that some of you are familiar with this now, but Open Up and Illustrative Mathematics came out with a new middle school curriculum. And it's something that I haven't had a lot of time to really get into, but I see it as something that I'm going to be implementing into these units as probably, I wish it would have came out at the beginning of the summer for me to really get into, because now it's like the school year's here, I have it, but I don't have time to do anything with it, so it'll probably be till next year. But I would almost guess that, a majority of districts will be using that just because, one, it's free, and two, I think it's very quality. So that's something to look out for, too. If you look at the top of my units that they actually click on, I've got a lot of specific directions for them just to make sure that I'm getting everything that I need. So like, for instance, they're going to be watching some videos about things. I'm expecting them to take notes on those videos. I'm expecting them to do all the examples that are on there. Now, how they do that is up to them. I mean, they can work with somebody at the same time. I have a lot of kids will do like headphone splitters, and they'll work at the same time and have conversations about it. I don't even mind, like, if they, pause it, work the problem, skip ahead, see how they did. I just need to see that they have some proof of actually understanding something. Normally when they're done, I'll ask them questions about it just to make sure that we're on the same page. So that's something I spell out very clearly. I also spell out the IXL and BuzzMath stuff as far as proof goes very clearly, so they see that. I have them send me screenshots of things, but those directions are very clear on here just to make sure that, again, the mathematical understanding part of things. A lot of people ask me how I keep track of all this stuff, so this is kind of like this is how I do it. So I basically, for the unit, I list everything that they do on here, and I just have it all numbered and things like that. So right now, on this integer operation unit, we're up through 12, so pretty much everybody's up through 12, except for I've got a couple people who are not up through 12 that I'm working with. But I'll just check it off on here as they go, so this is kind of my indication on where everybody is at. And it takes a while to keep track of things. You kind of have to be organized, and I never thought of myself as really an organized person, but doing something like this makes you be organized, so this is what I came up with to figure something out as far as keeping track of things. And I'll keep track of everything that they do on here. Let's see.
So you don't have a learning management system that's used?
No, I have my website, and that's where students get all the information from, and then they turn everything in or send me screenshots and things like that, and then I'll just put it on there. Other things. So as far as when they finish things, like that's a question that I normally get, is, I have my 7th graders, and I'll have some 7th graders that'll get through everything that I have for 7th grade. So the nice thing is we'll just move on to all the stuff that we have for 8th grade, because I have all that stuff set up too. And it's different at different schools, but like at our school, you can do Algebra 1 like with the high schoolers in 8th grade. And it's one of the things where we used to do that where it was just based off of like test scores and things like that, which is a really bad way to do it, because then you have all these students that have all these gaps with different things. And so now, in the last about 4 or 5 years, it's been strictly, have you finished every single thing that I have for you to do, and have you showed me a high level of understanding? And it sounds like it would be easy to get through all this. It's not easy to get through all this stuff. I had about 9 or 10 kids this summer that are taking Algebra 1 this year that came in, 3 or 4 days during the summer for 2 to 3 hours a day to work on this stuff, just so because that's what they wanted to do. That was their goal, so we did that. And those kids, actually, it's nice because I still have contact with those kids, so I will still have them do all the tasks that we do just outside of class, and all the other stuff that we do that isn't unit-based. Because what I found is once they get into Algebra 1, it's Algebra 1. Like, they're not doing anything else other than, here's the book, we're going 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4. So I want to try to give them all these problem-solving opportunities and different things, so I work with them in those regards. Grade-wise, a lot of people will ask about grades. Grades for me are like the simplest thing ever. I would say that right now, if I showed you my grade book, 99% of the students, it says 100% is what it says. And basically what I do is I assess every single thing that's turned in. Everything, all of it. So there's no like completion points. There's no like, if you had something written down, I'll give them 5 points or something like that. Every single thing. And I will give feedback on every single thing. I will give it back to them for revisions. And it's just a constant back and forth as far as making sure that you really understand something. And it's not like 70% proficient, 80% proficient. It's 100% proficient because I want them to actually know everything that we're doing. I don't want them to move on if it's just 70% or 80%. And I also tie full credit to that. So if a student gets, only half of something right the first time around, then they get full credit when they turn it back in, and it's fine, and we've talked about it, and we've figured things out. So that makes grading for me pretty simple. And to be honest with you, if I didn't have to keep an actual grade book, I wouldn't keep an actual grade book, but I have to keep an actual grade book, so that's something that I actually do. But grades are kind of the least of my concerns when it comes to this thing. And it's always confusing to parents a little bit, and you have to kind of talk with them a little bit about how it works. And that's why I have that whole parent note at the top, that if you care to read through that just to see what I tell parents, that's something that you can do. But really what I've found out with parents is they are super thrilled that their student, one, enjoys math, enjoys class now, and is actually getting somewhere. And they come home with a smile on their face about it because they've actually figured something out. And I think that's the thing, that if you're having problems with parents, or you think that changing to something this drastic is going to be a big deal, that's the thing that's going to turn. It's not going to be about, specifically what we're doing, because they'll still probably be confused about that. It's just that their student actually knows something, they're having success, they're improving on some different things. So we do other things too, because I would say that we work on the units probably 40 or 50% of the time. So Monday I said that we work on mini lessons. So this will be just like a short lesson that I don't feel like fits with any of the units that we do. So like I can actually just go straight to the mini lesson page, and we've done scientific notation the last 2 Mondays. So we'll do that for 8th grade. That's something I didn't feel fit with any of my big units. So that's something they'll work on. So basically what happens is they'll go through these things here. It'll probably take them 20 to 30 minutes out of the class period, and then they can assess what they need to be working on. So they might need to work on the task that they did this week. They may need to work on some of the unit stuff they worked on this week. It's really kind of their choice thing as far as what they need to do to meet those deadlines. Tuesday we do a task, and I showed you those things. Wednesday we'll do a spiral practice. So basically I will just have some questions from the past that I will put in here. Like here I've got some negative exponent questions or some fraction exponent questions that we've done this year. Just a review of some ratio things, of surface area and volume. So this again will take 10 to 15 minutes. Then they have the rest of the time to work on wherever they're at or the stuff that they need to work on. Thursday we'll do computation and facts. So this is the screen that they'll get, and so this is like what my 8th graders did, last Thursday. So I have them do some basic facts, and this has negatives and stuff like that. So basically when you click on this program, you can tailor it to whatever you want to, but it's basically 30 questions. It does have a timer in the corner, and it counts up, and I'm not a big timer guy, because I'm a big take as much time as you need to make sure that you actually understand something guy. But this timer counts up, so I don't feel bad about it. And actually, it's a good kind of mode for improvement, because they can see at the beginning of the year, it took me 10 minutes to do this. Right now, it's taken me 8 minutes to do it. So it's a nice just kind of price point for them to see where they're at compared to where they were at, and not worrying about anybody else. It just helps them out a little bit to stay fresh on the basic facts, because who's had somebody in their class that doesn't know what 4 times 2 is? I mean, it happens to everybody. So it's nice to make sure that you have a little bit of practice. And then we do these computation problems. And again, they'll work on these during class. They'll probably take 20 to 25 minutes. And I will have all the answers and work on this, so I can check and make sure that they have. I put the answers to the questions right after it, so they can kind of self-check themselves. But I will check all the work individually to make sure that they're doing it, in whatever mode that they want to do it. I mean, some of the kids like to change all the fractions to decimals. Some of the kids like to, just do it like the traditional way. It's whatever you want to do, as long as they have a way to figure it out. That's what I care about. And then Friday, we do a question with the whole class, so I'll put this up on the screen. I will give them 10 minutes to talk it out, work it out, and then I'll pull sticks to see who gets to talk about it. And basically their conversations are, they go over a lot of times making sure that they justify what it means. I find that a lot of the students can write what it means, but then when it comes to talking to it, that's even another step. So you have to make sure that you give them opportunities to talk about things. So that'll take about 20 minutes once we get through the discussion, and they'll have more time to talk, or more time to work. So they always have a lot of work time in my class, which is good because we always do a lot of stuff. So they always have time to work on things. Deadlines. I know people always ask me, well, how do you get the work like if they don't get it done? Because, chances are with kind of a self-paced thing, you're going to have some kids that don't get things done. And I am the same way. I have some kids that don't get things done, so let me tell you how that works. So first of all, I have the homework list up here. And I have all the things that we've done or that are due right now. And so I do have deadlines. It's not like I don't have any deadlines. So like for the units, I'll put it together in chunks. Like on transformations, we'll be through 28 by tomorrow at the end of the day. If you don't give students some deadlines, like especially with middle school students, like you could have students that will take forever, like forever on this. And you want to be as proactive as possible. So like I'm going to have already put in the bank, I'm going to have 3 kids that are not done through that. And so then I just set up plans with them or set up times to meet with them. It's nice, at our school we have a study hall time, which is nice, so I can get kids in during then. We also have an MTSS time at the end of the day, so I can talk with kids about it then too. And then, I'm always there in the morning. I say kids can come in at 7. I'll usually get about 4 or 5 kids that come in at 7 o'clock to work on stuff. I stay till 4:30, so that's time that they could work. But I always try to be proactive with these students just to make sure that we get these things accomplished and they do it at a high level. Because I know some of the time when you do some of this stuff, I know that I've seen it before, you let it slide, with maybe not as quality as you want it to be just to get it done, and I want to make sure that that doesn't happen because I want to make sure that they actually get something and they actually understand something. So I try to be very proactive with that. I talked about grades quite a bit. Just some tips as far as self-pacing and doing some other stuff in your classroom. I already talked about the understanding part of things, but you just have to make sure that that's a built-in expectation in your classroom, that they're showing you everything, that they're justifying everything. That's a really big deal. Because again, if you do something and they don't really actually understand it and you just move on, then you might as well have not done it in the first place. Sitting at your desk, like that drives me crazy when people sit at their desk. Like I think the only time I sit down is like during our 15-minute lunch or something like that. So stand up and walk around and have conversations with the kids because that's the real point. Otherwise, you should just be lecturing up front is what you should be doing. This gives you time to go around and actually have real conversations with these kids. Meet with the kids you need to work with. Sometimes I think with technology you can lose that personal aspect with kids, especially if you're sitting down at your desk all the time. It's a great time for me too to walk around and just ask them about something that happened last night or something like that. Like how'd the cross country meet go or something like that. It's a good time to be able to do that. And you really have to have good relationships with your students if you're going to do this, because you can imagine 30 kids in a room, they all have a computer, they could be anywhere at the same time. I don't use one of those monitoring programs because what I feel like monitoring programs, they basically are asking for you to sit at your desk and look at a screen, and so I don't use that. We have a lot of, trust kind of things in my room that's really what I base it on, and I feel like the students do a pretty good job with it. Expectations high also drives me crazy when teachers, you're working for the first 45 minutes, and if you get done with something, the option is play a game when you're done, or the option is not something math related when you're done. Have it be all math all the time, so that's the expectation. Otherwise, students fall into they're just not working at the capacity they should be at, and you're not maximizing your time. And you got to think to yourself, if I'm giving them 15 minutes to play games in class, what else could I be doing to make sure that they're getting somewhere, get a little bit further? And that most of the time, that's just a planning thing as a teacher. You have to be willing to put in that extra time to make sure that that's something that's happening. I do have my contact information here, and I think we got about 5 minutes that I can take some more questions, and I'll be here a little bit later. But I will just say, in summary, I would never go back from having the kids all have computers. Like, I cannot even imagine what we would be doing if, like, they said one day, I would quit. I would quit is what I would do for sure, because it would just be like, what are we even going to do? Like, I changed for so many reasons. Probably the main reason I changed is because I was really successful in school, like middle school, high school. It wasn't hard. Math was pretty easy to me. But I found out that I didn't really know any of it, though. Like, I was just memorizing things, and I knew how to do it and memorize things. But then I look around at all my other classmates, like in high school, I'm like, well, this person didn't make it, and this person didn't make it, and this person made it, and like 20% of the people made it. That's crazy. And so I think about my students, and they're all working at different paces and different levels, and I really feel like if given time, all my students can be successful. If I do the format of lecture, homework, we're moving on. Lecture, homework, we're moving on. I just have such a small percentage of my students that are actually getting anything out of that it just doesn't make any sense to me to do that. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I switched. And again, with the conversation part of things. I want to make sure that my students are having these conversations, and when it's just like this, conversations aren't happening very much, and I want to make sure that that's what's happening, because that's where you get to the real understanding, is that verbal explanation part of it. All right, so sorry that was so long, but anybody have any questions that they would like to ask right now over any of this stuff. Yes?
Do you ever, I really like that idea of letting kids choose their own partners, but as a classroom teacher, I run into that kid who nobody wants to pick, and too shy, autistic kids, for example. Do you have a strategy to help with that? What do you do?
I guess normally, I mean, I have a lot of kids that just don't like to work with people either. So, I mean, I'll be open to that. It's not like they have to work with somebody. But, I mean, that's just I mean, it's almost like, you know, like the lunch table example, too. It's just like you just have to be kind of cognizant of that. And it's not like I can't pair somebody up with somebody. You know, if I know that somebody really wants to be paired up with somebody, then I can do that myself or ask if somebody can be included is fine. Yeah, I mean, that's something that you can do for sure. It's just, you know, I have a lot of kids that just don't, not a lot, but probably, you know, if I have that class of 30, I can picture about 8 of the students that just, I mean, they just kind of want to work by themselves. Doesn't mean they don't talk with other groups or get up and ask some questions or things like that, but, you know, they just want to be by themselves at that time, so. Anybody else? All right, well, I've got all my contact information on here. You can still access the site that I have on here. If you ever want to drive to Grundy Center, I would be happy. The kids would be happy to have you in there. It's fine. But I will be around this afternoon, too, if you have any questions. But I appreciate everybody hanging in there. Thank you.